All right, welcome everyone. This is the November 13th chapter meeting for Central Indiana ASSP. Unfortunately, we're still not able to meet in person and network and see each other, but luckily we're still able to continue our educational meetings in the form of webinars, and we have an exciting topic here with Jon presenting the 2021 changes to the NFPA 70E standard. But before we get into our main topic, I would just like to share a couple quick announcements about the chapter. Again, if you haven't met me, my name is Jeff Fox. I'm the Central Indiana ASSP chapter president. We have a couple upcoming events that we're excited about. One of our most popular events throughout the year and most attended is our Indiana Department of Labor OSHA update. So that is on December 11th at the same time, 11 to 12. So if you're interested in attending that, all this information for the meetings, you can go onto the Central Indiana ASSP website and register for those to get that information. And then January 8th, we have an exciting topic, branding safety, a journey into the future of safety influence. And that's presented by a group of individuals. They call themselves the Safety Justice League. So if you've heard of a pretty well-known speaker in the ASSP Society, Abby Ferry, and her supporting cast, they'll be joining us virtually. I'm not sure where they're living from, but that's the perks of having chapter meetings online, is you get to have different guest speakers from around different states. Then on February 12th, we have leadership skills, 18 lessons learned on the links. I think it's Dr. Isabel Perry. Just moved into the Indiana area. She's actually has a website called thesafetydoctor.com. So we're very happy to have her come online and present. So if you're interested in those, mark your calendars and go onto the web page and register. Also, the 2021 Indiana Safety Conference registration is now open. We work very closely with the Indiana Chamber of Commerce to put on this event. We have been doing this for many, many years. It grows and grows in attendance every year. We realize this year it may be a little bit different due to the COVID situation, but we are pushing forward with a hybrid level of a conference. So there'll be options to attend in person via social distancing, and then there'll also be an option to attend in a virtual atmosphere. So we urge you to go on, register for the event to get the early bird discount rates. And hopefully we can have a couple individuals there in person, social distancing, some of the hands-on activities, and then hopefully we'll have some people online as well. So please go into the website, take a look at that information for the 2021 Safety Conference in March. ASSP is proud to partner with BCSP. They've recently moved to the Indianapolis area. So one perk of working with this group is having a relationship with some of the members of the BCSP, and David West specifically sits on our board of directors. And one perk they have is if you're in attendance today, you can reach out to David West. His email is on the page there, and he'll give you a free promo code to waive an exam application fee. So if you're interested in sitting for any of the BCSP certifications, those cost, between $100 and $2 to exam fee, reach out to him and he'll help you get a promo code, which is great. If any company that you work for is looking to sponsor a local activity, an organization, us here at ASSP always are happy to accept sponsorships. Typically when we meet face-to-face, a sponsor would come in, buy the lunch for the group, and talk about their company for a little bit. But more than happy to have sponsors come online to our webinars and talk with 30 or 40 safety professionals and sponsor our meetings. So if your company is interested in that, reach out to us and we can help you out there. We also try to keep our job openings kind of current on our website. So if you are looking for a job or you have a job that you would like to post, we have a little over 500 members that are clicking through our website. So it's a good place to go to look for jobs and to post jobs as well. And one of the newer programs I'm excited to launch this year as part of the chapter is our mentoring program. So basically, this is when we take a seasoned safety professional like many of you that have been in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, and then we pair you with an emerging professional that is, fresh out of school in their first year or two of the profession. So what we're asking, if you're interested in being a mentor, or I recognize some names from some of the schools here, or if you're interested in connecting to a mentor, please reach out to us and we'll get that program started and connect you with hopefully someone in the same industry that you work. So such a great program to get started here. And we only have a few mentors signed up so far. So please, if you're interested in that, shoot me an email, go onto our website, send an email to our functional inbox and let us know if you're interested in being a mentor or a mentee. Last update here, our chapter loves to do community outreach, but we're always looking for ideas. If you have a local organization or a school or a business, or in this case, Eagle Scout project, that we can help out financially, as long as it has a environmental health and safety tie to it, we're more than happy to donate to that fund. Or if you have a group or an organization where we can go volunteer our time, we would love to do that. The picture here on the screen is an Eagle Scout project where he built dividers for a classroom so that it would help in the barriers of COVID-19. So we were able to supply some funds to help him purchase some of those materials. So it's good to help him do that. All right, you can connect with us on any of the social media channels out there. Specifically, our newest one is YouTube. So today's recording will be posted on YouTube so we can share those with individuals that were unable to make it. But please go out into those socials. If you type in CI ASSP, it should take you directly there. Okay, so that's it from me for announcements. So with that, I'm going to introduce Jon Biggs. He's a Purdue University faculty member and also independent consultant. So he's going to be talking through some of the 2021 changes to the NFPA 70E. So I'm going to stop sharing, Jon, and let you go ahead and do that.
All right, thank you, Jeff. So hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Again, my name is Jon Biggs, and I've worked at Purdue University for just about 30 years now, literally 30 years. It was as of May. I started there as a student when I was 17 years old, and I actually went there to go to school, and I worked full-time in physical facilities, the department at that time, as an electrician. My father was a senior high voltage engineer for Texaco as well as for Purdue University. So I grew up on a farm, but I had a background doing electrical work, helping my father do side jobs at times and just work around the house on the farm. And he did a great job of teaching me things that I really wasn't informed of when I first hired in with my employer at the time. And, that's one of the things. We've come a long, long way since 1990. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is some of these updates, because there's constant change in this industry. And that's one of the things that I want to emphasize, is how we can look at this in a positive way. It's not just change for the sake of change, but it's change to enhance our safe work practices in regards to electrical work, which can be very, very dangerous at times. So hopefully at the end of today, we're all going to have a better understanding. And we're not going to cover to the extent that we've been covering this with our employees at Purdue, because what we end up doing there is spending about 3 hours or 4 hours on this information. And we really cover not just what's changed, but what that means to us, the application of it. I want to still do as much of that today as we can with the time that we've got. So I'm going to share what the real purpose, again, the focal point of NFPA 70E is, some of the key changes that have taken place for 2021, as there have been some major changes again, as we've seen since 2012, 2015, the 2018 edition as well, and now in 2021, as well as how we can use these changes to enhance, basically, and this is really the purpose, to enhance our own electrical safety programs and our electrical safe work practices within our respective facilities. So that's our goal for today. Now, the first thing I encourage people to do is to read the NFPA 70E forward. And the reason why, usually the forward of anything, it doesn't matter what it is, any book that we're reading, the Bible, the NFPA 70E, the National Electric Code, you name it. We always skip the forward, and there's some critical information that's shared there. So the first thing we understand about NFPA 70E is it's been around for a long time, literally since 1979. So the focus during that time frame has moved from installation related requirements, much as what we read in the National Electric Code, the NEC, and it's moved to safe work practices. That focus has also transitioned from relying on PPE, as we did many years ago through the 80s and the 90s, and even, portions of 2000 and just the past decade, to now what we're focusing our attention on is risk assessment, really analyzing what it is that we're doing, what are the risks associated with those tasks, and what are the various controls, the engineering controls, the administrative controls, what can we do to either eliminate, if at all possible, or at the very least minimize these hazards of shock, arc flash, and arc blast as much as possible. Okay, so in the forward, the other thing that it does is it's going to show us kind of a summary of what has changed, so we can get a quick glimpse without having to sift through all 90 some odd pages, roughly 92, 94, 96 pages of the standard. So in the 2021 edition, what we see is Article 110. It was revised in a great way, probably the most significant way it has been recently, recent years, to now absorb portions of Article 120, Article 130, different portions that really focused on general requirements. We also look at the terms. Now there's a few terms. I don't want to get bogged down with definitions. Those are things that you can look up yourself, but I will highlight the meaning of a few changes that we've seen. So the term arc resistant, big change here, because in the past that's always been applied to switchgear. It was always called arc resistant switchgear. Now it's just arc resistant equipment. So it's being applied to many other pieces of equipment, including low voltage equipment. We've got Article 360 and Annex R that's associated with it, about 17 pages in that annex. It's really focusing our attention for the first time on capacitors, because there's been several critical injuries, even fatalities throughout industry here in this country and in other countries related to capacitors, and the focus not being given that was due when it came to de-energizing the system, putting it in an electrically safe work condition, but overlooking the need to discharge capacitors and how to actually do that. And then we've got Annex D that was updated. We won't talk a lot about this because this really involves engineers. It's going to involve suppliers, outside vendors that would provide, or engineering firms that would provide an incident energy analysis for your work area. But what has been updated now as well is the IEEE 1584 standards. So this is the second edition now. The 2018 edition of that provides much greater accuracy on our arc flash studies, the incident energy analysis, if we do that in-house or if we have an outside firm do it. So we're seeing significant improvements in the accuracy based on the changes in that standard as well. So the one thing I always highlight here is just a reminder that we are under the 2021 edition now. That came out back in September 4th, I believe, is when that was finally released, and it went into effect in September. So, a lot of people think January 2021 is when we're under this, and right now we're actually applying this. At Purdue, we strive to do that as soon as it's released, because what we want to do, and we even try to anticipate what's coming up as far as updates, so that we recognize and we understand what we need to do to not just stay in compliance, but to keep our employees that do electrical work as safe as possible. So you see from 2018, the outgoing edition, this hierarchy of safety controls on this pyramid. First and foremost, what they wanted to direct our attention to was elimination of the hazards. And that is still the intent moving into 2021, and it probably will be moving forward continuously. In NFPA 70E, the goal is to eliminate these electrical hazards of electrical shock, arc flash, and arc blast, if at all possible. But if we can't, and there's times we can't, There's times we have to understand we might need to do testing and troubleshooting on equipment, and we would need to have the electrical energy present. So in order to now minimize the hazards as much as possible, we have to take some combination of substitution, of engineering controls, of awareness, of administrative controls, and then last, and certainly not least, but it needs to be viewed as the last measure of protection, personal protective equipment. How can we combine those 5 things if we can't eliminate the hazard to minimize it as much as possible? So the way these updates occur, some people think it's a small group of people, subject matter experts, a few dozen of them that sit around in an office out east, which they weren't able to do this year, obviously, like many of us weren't able to do, but that's not what happens here. What actually happens is they put out this information and they want to get public input. And they do have a panel of subject matter experts guiding these committees for updates on NFPA 70E, but you can see here on this slide, the first draft for the 2021 edition actually had 332 public inputs that were given across industry from people that were subject matter experts that were concerned about these updates for NFPA 70E. So these are people in the electrical industry looking at this, saying, hey, here's some input. That led to 86 first revisions. And then in the second draft for 2021, there were 115 additional public comments. That led to another 43 second revisions. So the point here is to keep in mind that when these changes take place, it's literally everybody in the electrical community that can contribute to these updates and have a say in what we do moving forward. Okay, so let's look at the definitions now. We jump into Article 100, and there were some terms that were deleted. There were others that were just made more clear. So the first one I want to focus our attention on is barrier. All right, here's what it said in 2018. It said a physical obstruction that is intended to prevent contact with equipment or energized electrical conductors and circuit parts, or to prevent unauthorized access to a work area. So what I want you to note here is the portion in red has been removed in 2021, the update. Reason being is because it was confusing. And we didn't want to confuse people with the difference between a barrier, which would be something like a disconnect switch or an electrical panel with a cover placed on it. That cover is a barrier. It's a physical obstruction that prevents contact with the equipment or energized electrical conductors and circuit parts. We don't want to confuse that with barricading, which is totally different. And that's something that a qualified electrical person would need to do in order to set up an electrically safe work condition as well. So barricading is actually preventing unauthorized access. So with barricading, it has little to do with a barrier. What it has to do with is barricading the area using pylons and perhaps danger, do not enter tape that would surround the work area to make unauthorized personnel aware of the fact that there's some kind of work going on there. There's a danger. You don't understand what it is, so do not enter the area. Okay, so they clarified that just to make sure that people weren't confusing the two, barrier and barricading. So I mentioned electrically safe work condition. There's always been a lot of confusion here as well because people thought previously in 2012, 2015, the 2018 edition, that an electrically safe work condition meant lockout tagout. And that's not the case. What this means, the electrically safe work condition, if you look at this definition, is it's a state. It's literally a state of being. So it's simply the state wherein all the hazardous electrical conductors or circuit parts that a worker might be exposed to are maintained in a de-energized state for the purpose of temporarily eliminating those hazards for a period of time for which the state is maintained. So the electrically safe work condition, the point here they're stressing in 2021 is it's not a process, it's a condition that they want to see us achieve. We achieve that condition through Article 120 guidelines, which guide us in lockout tagout, de-energizing, verification of the presence of no energy, and then locking and tagging it out adequately. Okay, the next definition, the third one I want to focus your attention on, is arc resistant equipment. So this is a major change because originally it included the word switchgear. And now switchgear has been removed. It's now just arc resistant equipment. And the reason they made this change is because now there are many more pieces of equipment, including, like I mentioned earlier, low voltage equipment like motor control centers, MCCs, that meet the definition of arc resistant. So what arc resistant means is it's simply if an arc flash would occur internally in a disconnect switch or in this motor control center, we'll use the motor control center as the primary example on the low voltage side, since we've probably all got those in our work areas. If an arc flash would occur in an arc resistant motor control center, what the equipment has been designed to do is now contain that arc flash and redirect it, usually through venting on the sides or out the back, to a safer zone away from the worker in their work area. So for years, switchgear has been designed this way, actually decades, but most low voltage equipment was not designed that way. And now we're seeing low voltage equipment that is arc resistant. So that's why they made the change to just the terminology arc resistant equipment. And then the final definition we'll look at here is just shock hazard. It's emphasizing again, and what they changed here was they added the term exposed energized electrical conductors or circuit parts. So that better aligns with the definition. What they're really concerned about, because we've all got work areas at Purdue University, we've got thousands of electrical panels, especially in our older buildings like Lily Hall, Smith, Matthews, Findler Hall, you name it, that have electrical panels out in the hallways in the open, but they're all covered. They're all locked. So nobody's going to get into those inadvertently and make contact with exposed energized electrical conductors or circuit parts. So they added this to the shock hazard so that people understand it's a source of possible injury or damage of health associated with contact to exposed parts, not just energized parts, because you can have energized parts in an area and they're adequately covered. They're not exposed. And that's where they wanted to clarify that. Okay, so now we move into Article 110. And in this article, this was a huge overhaul that took place. There were massive changes. And basically what they did was they moved portions of Article 120 and Article 130 into 110 for better alignment, because there were portions in 120 and 130 that really applied to general requirements, which is what 110 focuses on. That's the original intent of it. So the thing I want to highlight again here is Article 110.1, it mentions under priority what their priority is, and it continues to be hazard elimination. So if at all possible, what we should always try to focus our employees, our staff's intentions on is first eliminating the electrical shock, the arc flash, and the arc blast hazards. And there's one way to do that, and that's de-energizing the circuits or the system, locking and tagging it out adequately. Okay, so they also have examples in Annex F. So you get down to the annex in the near the end of NFPA 70E, the electrical standard, and it's got these examples of hazard elimination that it kind of walks us through. So you're not left just guessing what we have to do, but it gives us those examples. All right, another huge change that occurred was here in Article 110.5A. And what this does is it specifically references the requirement for an employer to develop and implement a site-specific electrical safety program. So this is huge, because basically it's telling the employer, we have the responsibility of developing a written program, just like OSHA requires for hazard communication, for personal protective equipment, for bloodborne pathogens, for so many other things. So here we have to do the same thing and develop an electrical safety program. And as part of that electrical safety program, this is a new part. It's a new subsection. It's 110.5K. They now require here in NFPA 70E's 2021 edition an electrically safe work condition policy. So what's that policy mean? Well, basically they're saying you need to add a statement as an employer. And this might seem too obvious, but we understand if you've ever dealt with human resources to any extent, we have to make sure things are clear. That expectations are clear. And that's what this is. So what they're emphasizing attention on again is our employees following the steps, and we have to outline those steps in the electrically safe work condition policy that they have to follow to create that electrically safe work condition. So basically this policy should spell out how at our facility we expect our employees to de-energize the circuit or the equipment they're working on, and how to control that form of hazardous energy, the electricity, by means of lockout tagout. So it's just specifying again to the employer, you have to identify clearly how you want employees to do this. (110.6) A4. So this is a huge change as well, and it's great. This didn't come about here when COVID really hit here in the United States back in March of 2020. This was actually in the works. It was already included. This is something they've been wanting to do because, let's face it, I mean, I've got a background in learning and development. I've done this for many years now. Many of you have as well. Blended learning is really probably the best option 99% of the time when it comes to implementing and applying adult learning principles. So we understand that there is an opportunity here, and NFPA 70E, the committee agreed. So for 2021 edition, they now added this part in 110.6A4 that says they encourage the use of interactive electronic or interactive web-based training as a component, a piece of classroom training. So we can't just simply rely, we understand OSHA when they talk about adequate training for fall protection, for electrical safety, for whatever it may be. Adequate training doesn't just mean what used to take place where people would pop a DVD in a DVD player and say, hey guys and gals, let's watch this, learn it, live it, love it, and apply it. And we pass a roster around, they sign their names, and then they go out in the field and they still really don't have any practical hands-on evaluation, experience, or training. So it doesn't mean just electronic or web-based training. Notice it says interactive, and notice it says there has to be a component. So this training can take place. They want to have somebody basically who can still serve as a subject matter expert to answer questions on that electronic or web-based training. That's the interactive part. And yet it's just a component. So it's got to be combined with classroom training. But this is great because we don't want to waste our time in classroom training. And I don't want to waste my time, my students' time on the academic side, teaching them about definitions. They can read about the definitions. And that's why I didn't want to spend a lot of time on multiple definitions with you all today. You can go out and read that. You can understand it. What web-based training is great for, though, is the theory and the definitions. You can share these principles as a foundation. You can share these definitions and set that foundation. And then when you do gather in a classroom setting, and now this is critically important because we have to limit the number of people in such a setting. I used to be able to conduct, hands-on forklift operator, powered industrial vehicle operator training. And I'd have 6 people there at any given time, and we'd be rotating through. Well, now I do it one-on-one. It takes that much longer every single time so that we can minimize exposure and take time to clean everything adequately. So now we can use our classroom time for what it's really meant for, the application of the theory, the principles, the definitions, as well as hands-on training that's required. So for electrical, we stop and think about multimeter use. You can go online and our employees, we can put them through fluke.com has got online training on multimeter basics. It's a 2-hour course, fantastic course, but that still doesn't give them any hands-on experience. And I can promise you, when you turn an employee loose in a 480 volt MCC and you're expecting them to use a multimeter that costs $650, like a Fluke T87 series, and you're expecting them to use it safely and properly to protect themselves primarily, but also to not destroy the equipment, you want to have some hands-on training. You do not want to rely on the fact that they just watched a video for a couple of hours and now they understand how to go out there and execute that. So, you've got the electronic web-based training that serves a purpose, blend that together with the hands-on training, and that's going to be the best solution. So another big change that occurred, 110.7C, there's new informational notes on multi-employer work sites. So what this is emphasizing again is that not just one employer is responsible now for identifying hazards. They're not worried about the controlling, the exposing employer that OSHA breaks out in their standards. Those still apply. So this is going hand in hand with OSHA. But what it's emphasizing here again is not to ignore the fact that we're all on the work site together, and literally, just as OSHA says, it means that no employer on that work site can turn a blind eye to safety or recognize hazards. It's everybody's responsibility, so it highlights the need for good cooperation between employers, contractors, and good communication as well. So another huge change that occurred was there's a whole new section, 110.12, that is on equipment use. So the big thing to understand here at the 80,000 foot level is it states that equipment shall be used in accordance with manufacturer's instructions. So the goal here that they had is to eliminate, if at all possible, and at the very least minimizing to a great extent, the misuse of equipment in applications that it simply wasn't designed for by the manufacturer. So an example, over the past, we've all probably seen, if we're in occupational safety and health, junction boxes. Metal junction boxes that were meant to be installed in a wall, in a ceiling, in commercial applications, but instead they're being used to hold a couple of duplex outlets, receptacles, and they're basically being turned into an extension cord on a construction site. That's not their intended use. OSHA's always had that in their standards, but this is an addition here in Article 110 for 2021 in NFPA 70E. So when we move into Article 120, what it mentions here is something about lockout tagout procedures, but this is critically important because it applies to so much more. It says these procedures have to be developed on the basis of existing electrical equipment and system, and it has to use suitable documentation, and here's the key point that's underlined, including up-to-date drawings and diagrams. So if anything gets neglected, usually in our workplaces, it's our one-line diagrams, the drawings, they get outdated very quickly. And then when renovations occur, we don't update those drawings typically, or we don't get rid of the old ones and bring in the new ones that maybe a contractor or an A&E firm provides for us. So the emphasis here is we need to do a better job of maintaining accurate drawings and diagrams so that our employees that are developing these safe work practices and equipment-specific written procedures for lockout tagout can do so using accurate drawings and diagrams. Okay, we get into Article 130. So here's a huge new update because it affects basically circuit breaker or switch operation, disconnect switches. So what it's saying here is under the term task on the left-hand side of the tables. And what's changed is one of the things, if you've gone out and you've ever gotten the PDF version of NFPA 70E, they've done away with that now. They do not have a PDF version. There is a link feature though that you can use, LNK, that you can use out there if you search for it, where you can get NFPA 70E, the 2021 edition, and it gives you access electronically for a number of licenses at your work site. The one limitation it has right now is you can't access it offline. So, that's something, a glitch they're working on, and they'll get to it, I'm sure. But just understand that right now, I used to be able to post all of this and show you pictures of it, images of it, what the tables actually looked like. And I can't do that right now because they did away with the PDF version that we used to purchase and use for our training. So under task, that column, it now adds operation of a circuit breaker or switch the first time after installation or completion of work or maintenance in the equipment. So now they put a time frame on operating a circuit breaker or switch. So the first time after work is done, or the first time after it's newly installed, you have to consider the likelihood of occurrence of an arc flash as yes, it's likely to occur. So that's a big change because in the past, that was not the case. They didn't have a time frame on this. Now they're saying when you operate a circuit breaker or switch, for the first time after it's installed or the first time after maintenance work has been completed on the equipment, you have to consider there's the likelihood of an arc flash occurring. Also, high-vis gear. So 130.7 gets into PPE updates. So high visibility gear like vests. You can get arc-rated vests. They absolutely exist. So this was added. But what I want you to note here is the calorie per centimeter squared rating on the high visibility vests does not have to be equal to or greater than the estimated incident energy of our equipment if it is not the primary factor for achieving minimum rating. So what they mean by that is if I'm wearing already a 12 calorie per centimeter squared pair of coveralls for my ARC rated protection from this 8.4 calorie per centimeter squared hazard that I'm working on. If I've got those coveralls on, that is the primary factor in me achieving minimum rating. So I've got garments on that exceed my hazard that I'm working on. So that's my ARC rated protection. Now, if I have to wear a high visibility vest, I don't have to wear a vest rated for the hazard. I can wear a vest that's just rated at 3 calories or at 4 calories per centimeter squared, as long as it's something that is not going to melt. Okay, so that's the focus here. People can get confused with this sometimes because they think layering of garments is something that's easy to do. So just remember that layering 2 8 calorie per centimeter squared garments doesn't equal or add up to 16 calorie per centimeter squared protection. That's not how it works. So Hugh Hoagland from Arcwear and eHazard, Jim Phillips and others that are out there, they've done a great job over the years of explaining to people, and you can access a lot of their stuff online and basically showing how this testing works. But what they always tell people to do is contact the manufacturer that's providing your ARC rated personal protective equipment and talk to them about the testing that's been used and what the layering of garments amounts to based on the specific garments that you're wanting to layer. That's going to give us the best guidance. Okay, an additional new PPE update in 130.7 is non-leather footwear is now permitted, but that's only if we can ensure that the non-leather footwear will not ignite, melt, or drip at the ARC rating required for PPE. So essentially, you have to prove that via ASTM testing methods from the manufacturer that the non-leather footwear actually meets those requirements. Otherwise, our supervisors had a lot of questions about that. And I say, guys, it's still a best practice, in my personal opinion, that we wear the proven electrical hazard rated leather boots or shoes. But they do put this in for flexibility's sake because there are some providers now that do meet these requirements for non-leather footwear. You just have to verify that through the manufacturer. Okay, kind of a final thing here, or next to a final thing about PPE updates, is the glove chart. They actually included now this new maximum use voltage chart for gloves in 130.7. So you can see that as well, the different classes from double aught all the way to 4. And it gives the maximum AC voltage, the maximum DC voltage, and those ratings as well for reference. And then we get into protective blankets. So this is another new thing. This might not affect many of you, but if you do any kind of utility work, high voltage work at your facility, like we do at Purdue, this was big because it added a lot of information that wasn't in the previous standards related to ARC protective blankets, the selection of them, the use, and the care of them. Okay, and then really a final thing here is something, again, that I mentioned at the outset that affects everybody to some extent. We've all got equipment, most likely in our work areas, that have capacitors in them or capacitor banks. So this is a whole brand new article. It's a huge area, Article 360. So you'll see as you go through that at the end of NFPA 70E for 2021, this is a new edition. What it does is it adds safety-related work requirements now for capacitors. Annex R, which is coupled with it. It basically provides a ton of details because it's 17 pages in length and it's all related to such work on capacitors. So first, it's going to really highlight, again, at the 50,000 foot level, specifics about effectively guarding capacitors from inadvertent contact. How can we prevent that from happening? At Purdue, we did have an employee several years ago that was working on a piece of equipment that did have a capacitor bank inside of it. And he overlooked it. He basically shut the equipment down by its normal stopping procedures, followed the equipment specific written procedures that they had in place at the time to lock and tag it out effectively. But they had left a portion out of those procedures for that piece of equipment about discharging the capacitors. And he actually got across the capacitor and it created a serious shock hazard. He was injured pretty significantly. So it was a great learning moment. We were able to work with that group on the academic side and explain, here's what we have to factor in. This is what we do on the maintenance side. You've got to do it as well because it obviously applies to your equipment. So first, how do we effectively guard capacitors from inadvertent contact? And then secondly, how do we determine discharge time for the capacitor? Now, Ultimately, the manufacturer is going to do this. That's where you can get that data from most accurately. But an industry best practice that's been out there for years and that's still considered to be a best practice is 5 minutes. So that's one of the rules of thumb that's still generally applied across the industry. Okay, so that's a lot of information we packed into just a few minutes here. And what I want to do now is just leave some time. I wanted to make sure we ended on time. Jeff mentioned that sometimes these things go over. I don't want it to go over and get into your lunch hour, or if this is your lunch hour, I want to maximize it. So has anybody got any questions related to what we're talking about today?
Hey, John, this is Jeff. While they're thinking of their questions, there was one question in the chat. Are you okay if we make this PowerPoint and recording available to our attendees today?
Yeah, absolutely. That's fine.
Great, perfect. And I do have a question. As far as compliance with the new updates, is there a certain time frame where businesses are expected to be in compliance with the updates?
So basically, as soon as these are released to the public, that's why I mentioned earlier that we try to jump on it quickly. But we've got a staff at Purdue. I mean, between myself, our electrical engineers, our electrical foreman in the low voltage, high voltage shop, we've got a lot of folks that work together and have for years that are very active in electrical safe work practices. And we've done this for many years now, so it's nothing new to us. And that's why we try to jump on it quickly, because literally as soon as these are released in September of the update year, they go into effect. So there's not like anything that's grandfathered in. Now, obviously, if OSHA comes in, some people ask, is NFPA 70E law? It's not law in the sense that NFPA can't come out. They can't enforce these standards. They can't fine anybody or cite them for failure to meet these standards, but OSHA can. And OSHA has proven multiple times now that they're going to use these standards as the best practice in industry for electrical safety in the workplace. So under general duty clause and even just the electrical safety requirements in the 1910 and 1926 portions of OSHA, they will enforce and direct our attention to NFPA 70E. And they understand if we're making a reasonable good faith effort to meet those standards and bring our workplace into compliance, they want to work with us. They don't want to fine us and our ability to do so.
Sure, great. Does anyone have any questions for John while he's here? I have one more question, John, then.
Yeah.
So of all the updates, in your personal opinion, what do you think maybe one or two of the most difficult or challenging updates would be for a business or a location or one of our members to go back to their facility and implement?
I think the biggest thing, Jeff, is I think that electrical safety program and building it as thoroughly as we need to have it built. We've got one at Purdue, and we usually share that openly with anybody. So if anybody doesn't know where to start, I'd be happy to provide some information and help them develop that program, because really it doesn't matter what NFPA 70 says with all these details. You can get lost in those. This reads like a legal publication, and it sort of is. But you want to set the foundation. And if we don't have that foundation of the electrical safety program specifically for our facility, typically most of our employees won't have access to 70E. We may only buy it for engineers. We may only buy a copy for management. So that's where I really think that if we can focus our attention on developing that electrical safety program and then including in it the policy, like it mentions, where we're trying to figure out what are our written procedures for lockout tagout, for ensuring we've got an electrically safe work condition in place. The other thing is in Annex I that people may find really useful. It's a checklist. So that's something new that's been implemented. You can go into Annex I, and I didn't share a whole lot of information today about it because just the time constraint, but Annex I actually gives you a checklist that you can follow. And what that helps your employees do now is if the administration at your facility is willing to back this and say, we need to look at risk assessment, now it puts the responsibility with that checklist in your qualified electrical employee's lap. And you can basically just instruct them to go out in the field and before they start a job, look at the scope of it, and then use this checklist to identify what is my risk or all the risks associated with this, and how am I either going to eliminate or minimize them. And it makes them identify those steps ahead of time before they ever start work.
Good. Yeah, a great resource for them to have. Yeah. Any questions from our attendees today? It's a quiet group today.
There anything? I see a couple here in the chat. Jeremiah looks like he was asking about a 110.5K. To what degree does the condition policy need to be spelled out? He says we have a machine-specific lockout tagout diagrams and procedures posted on each item. So yeah, that would be what they're looking for. But what they also want to see is just that in your electrical safety program, you actually address or add in this condition policy now, so that it mentions to your employees that you are expecting them, if you do get a new piece of equipment in, let's say like a large air handler, very complex system, it wants you to spell out to them that they're responsible for basically developing equipment written lockout tagout procedures for that to put it in an electrically safe work condition. So yeah, you guys sound like you're doing really well in regards to that. And if anybody has any other questions, Jeff, you can even share my email with them.
Yes, I put that in the chat at jdbiggs@purdue.edu.
Yeah. Yep. And I'd be happy to help with any questions they might have moving forward. So
Perfect.
That's all I've got. I just want to thank you for the opportunity and thank everybody for their time.
There's a question here from Warren. He said, what about the yellow jackets that may not have any flame resistance?
So what you can never do, so this kind of goes into the same thing in regards to fall protection equipment, like a body harness and a lanyard. If I have a hazard of 8.4 calories per centimeter squared that I have to work on, and let's say I'm in a high voltage situation where I'm in a bucket truck. So I'm in the bucket truck, obviously I'm required by OSHA standards, ANSI standards to now wear that body harness and lanyard and tie off to the boom, manufacturer's tie off point. I can't wear, even though I might be wearing arc rated coveralls, I cannot wear a flammable piece of apparel over the top of those. So my body harness also has to be arc rated. So when it comes to high visibility gear, anything you're putting over the top or on the outside of your arc rated equipment cannot be melting in its type. It has to be arc rated, non-melting. So does that help answer the question, Warren? There's a lot of vests out there that are just.
Yeah, I was concerned about if it caught on fire. I mean, if you had the good stuff on underneath, if that thing caught on fire, you'd still be in bad shape.
Yeah, that's why they added that in, and they made sure people understood it still had to be arc rated as long as it was a high visibility vest. They just allow you to basically wear your coveralls. If they're my primary form of protection, arc rated PPE, I can put on a lower calorie per centimeter squared vest, and that makes it a little bit lighter and more breathable for me to wear in maybe hot conditions.
There is one question from Nick. He said, Jeff, can you mention again who to get a hold of for the voucher for the BCSP code? So Dave West, are you still online? If you want to come off mute and kind of talk about the voucher program that BCSP has and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, thanks. That's something I have to work through my certification services. It's either certification services or marketing. It's one of the other departments, but since I'm kind of the interface with the chapter, I'll just have to gather. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I know they just told me if anybody wants the code, they'll give it to me and I can provide it to whoever wants it.
And your email, david.west@bcsp.com?
No, .org.
.org.
BCSP.org, yeah.
Yep. I'll put it in the chat here.
Okay,
Perfect. david.west@bcsp.org.
that's correct.
All right. Any other questions from the group here while we have John here? I don't see any in my chat. Do you see any in yours, John? I think you may be on mute.
Yeah, there's nothing new that I see,
Okay.
Jeff, in the chat.
Well, great. We appreciate you being here today, John, to kind of give that great summary of all the updates to the standards. So, you know, as you mentioned, if anyone has any questions to reach out to you, it sounds like you're more than happy to help and assist and very knowledgeable with your experience. So, just like to thank everyone for coming today. We'll send out an email with instructions on how to get your CEU points. Also, we'll update this PowerPoint on our website. And then also in the next few days, we'll put this recording out onto our YouTube channel so you can share it or review it again if you need. So with that, we're going to say, you know, thanks for joining today and have a good rest of your day and the weekend. And thanks again, John.
Thank you.